On to the next speaker. That's Ancia Cornelius. And she is a courageous lady because she generated an up-to-date inventory of all medicinal plants in South Africa. With dramatic numbers of new records. So, Ancia, over to you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Yeah, and I want to thank you all for staying to the last session on the last day. I really appreciate it. Yeah, so my name is Ancia, as Prof already said. He is my supervisor, and I'm from the University of Johannesburg. And yeah, I will share a little bit more about this inventory or checklist that I made for us. So my study region is the flora of Southern Africa region. So that includes Namibia, Botswana, South Africa, Eswatini, and Lesotho. And this area, as many people has pointed out before, is quite known for its high diversity of plants. We have 21,467 species, of which 76% are endemic to this area. It is also a place that is known for its rich cultural heritage. It's the host of the oldest lineage of modern humans, the Plum people. And as Prof also shown before, this picture of a rock painting also serves as this ancient relationship that people have with plants in this area. So apart from these rock paintings that has some documentation of medicinal plant use in this area, there's also been a lot of people that came to visit Southern Africa because we are also positioned in a strategic place on the trade route. So there were researchers, travelers, yeah, all kinds of curious people that came to Southern Africa to document plant use. So one of the first ones was Simon van der Stel. He went on a journey to Namaqualand in 1685, and he was one of the first people after the rock paintings to write down some of the plant uses of this area. And then in 1785, we had Thunberg. He was a researcher, and he traveled Europe, Africa, Asia, and yeah, he also documented some medicinal plants. And then in the 1800s, between the 1840s and 1860s, we had Popper, which very usefully recorded the remedies of the colonists of the Cape of Good Hope. Yeah, and after him came Smith. He updated the Materia Medica of South Africa in 1895. And then in 1962, Watt and Breyer Brandwijk created this really thick book of medicinal and poisonous plants of Southern and Eastern Africa, which is a very valuable resource of the ancient plant use, or the olden plant use. And then in 1997, my own supervisor also created a nice overview of the medicinal plants of South Africa. And then in 2002, the last checklist was created of the medicinal and magical plants of Southern Africa. So naturally, that was also, as you can see, here's the book. And that was also the last, or the book that I used as a primary resource to update this checklist for the area. And then on the right-hand side, I just name all the other resources that I used. Obviously, I also looked at the newer published research, like in the last 2 decades, to update this list. So I also used 2 databases to review and update the scientific names. So I was looking at South African National Biodiversity Institute. I've got a database, a new Poaceae database, and then also Plants of the World Online. My statistical analysis was mostly done in Excel because it wasn't too complicated. But when I wanted to do something more interesting or more complicated, then I would use R Studio. So to get to my main results, we now have 4,120 medicinal taxa and 3,784 medicinal species in this area. And if you compare that with the list of 2002, it's about 1,200 new records. So I just wanted to also indicate there that there was about 752 taxa and 647 species that I excluded from my list, which was originally mentioned in Arnold et al. And the reason for that is I could not find evidence that these species are specifically being used in Southern Africa for medicinal use. It's probably for medicinal plants of other parts of Africa. Then I also just wanted to quickly show that in the last 2 decades, which is shown there in the red square, there has been quite an increase in research on medicinal plants, which could obviously contribute to the large number of new records of this area. And then what I also did is I looked at the documentation of indigenous medicinal plants versus the documentation of exotic plants in this area over time. So, and as you can see, like this ratio between indigenous and exotic has also changed quite a bit over time. And then I also looked at the number of medicinal plant species per family. So here I have the top 10 species-rich medicinal plant families in Southern Africa. And shown in the dark columns are the number of medicinal plant species, and then versus the total number of species of each of these plant families. And as you can see here, Asteraceae, Fabaceae, and Poaceae are actually quite large families, and I think my colleagues have also mentioned this in their work. So they have quite a lot of medicinal species in them. And then also, if you look on a global scale, Apocynaceae, Euphorbiaceae, Lamiaceae, and Rutaceae are globally known medicinal families, so it's no wonder that they also appear here. And then also, if you compare this to the rest of Africa, all of these top 10 species-rich families actually correlates with what we have in Africa, except for Asphodelaceae and Rutaceae, which is there in the blue. They are a little bit more dominant than in Southern Africa. And then I also compared some of the cultures of Southern Africa according to the top 5 medicinal plant families. And as you can see here, so the Asteraceae and Fabaceae families, which is the dark and the dark column and the cream column, they are quite dominant in the Cape herbal medicine, Khoi and San, and Sotho and Zulu cultures. And then the Fabaceae family is quite prominent in the Herero, Tswana, Ovambo, and Venda cultures. And then also the Euphorbiaceae family, you can see it plays a little bit of a more significant role in the Venda and the Tswana cultures. I also looked at the top 23 genera with the highest number of medicinal plant species. So the medicinal species are indicated with the dark columns. And also I just wanted to point out here, and I think it also correlates with what Marlet found. You can see a few familiar names here coming up, because these are also quite popular medicinal species, and there's quite a from these genera, there are quite a lot of species that are developed for their commercial products. So we have Aloeferox, for instance, that's cosmetic products, and Agathosma has all the like puchu teas, and then Lacertia, Lacertia frutescens, which was also mentioned, is like the cancer bush, which is used for cancer treatment. Then lastly, I also looked at how this medicinal plant taxa has been cited over time. And I have basically 2 main columns here. And I looked at the citation of these medicinal species before and after 2002. The reason why I used 2002 is because that is when the last checklist was made, and I'm interested to know what happened in research in the last 2 decades. And here you will see all the species and taxa that I highlighted here in orange are the ones that has been consistently popular before and after 2002. And then it's very obvious here that Artemisia afra has come out on the top of the list of both before and after 2002. And the reason for that is just a really popular plant, medicinal plant in the whole of Africa, but also in Southern Africa. And then Apocynaceae humericalidia, which was also just mentioned, the African potato. There has been a lot of financial incentive in the last 2 decades to also do a lot of research on it, and therefore it has also gotten to the second number on my list. And then there's 2 exotic species, actually, Ricinus communis and Datura stramonium, which has also been quite popular in research before and after 2002. Yeah, so Ricinus communis is a castor oil plant, and Datura stramonium is the thorn apple. And I thought it was quite interesting to also find them here. So yeah, in conclusion, this updated inventory obviously create this wonderful springboard for future research for us in this area. And it reflects this rich and diverse ethnobotanical heritage that we have. Yeah, and the timeline of the documentation over time, it has been really obvious to me that we keep on like deepening our understanding of the indigenous knowledge in this area. And this list also obviously provides us with a starting point for more commercial product development. And I created this list with the associated literature also next to each of these species. And therefore, I also think that can help a lot to preserve our traditional knowledge. And then obviously also help to monitor and manage the conservation of these popular species that popped up. Yeah, and then lastly, I think if we looked at like the exotic species ratio that's changing, as well as the new records, it definitely shows that we have an adaptive and dynamic traditional medicinal system, and we need to characterize and describe it better. Yeah, and this is just my bibliography. And yeah, I just would love to thank everybody here, and as well as SCB that gave us the opportunity to yeah, be here and present. And of course, my supervisor who has created the opportunity for all of our students to be here, as well as the University of Johannesburg, that yeah, it's my university. Thank you.